Well, thanks, Randy, and thanks to all of you brave Canadians for being out here and peacefully supporting our objection to the pandemic measures. For those of you not as familiar with medicine as I am and familiar with medical ethics, I'm going to provide you with 20 examples of how practical ethical medicine should be done and hasn't been done during the pandemic. And because it's cold out, I'm just going to zip right through these, okay? Okay, 1, contagious and serious are two very different things. The authorities have purposely confused the two. Warts are contagious, heart attacks are serious. Medicine distinguishes between having a disease and dying of a disease. You may have warts, but you die from a heart attack, not from your warts. 2, COVID is contagious, but is generally only serious to an identifiable and very small percent of the population, most of whom, sadly, have only a few years of life left. 3, doctors do not simply measure loss of life. We also measure years of life lost. An 85-year-old in a nursing home who dies of COVID is sad, but they lose less than 5 years of life. A 20-year-old who dies of myocarditis from the vaccine loses at least 65 years of life. That's a big difference. 4, contact tracing is very useful to identify diseases like gonorrhea because it's spread by having sex. Coronaviruses like COVID are very contagious because they're spread by breathing. Contact tracing for COVID is therefore not very helpful because most of us breathe more often than we have sex. 5, no matter how many treatments the medical profession develops, we cannot prevent death if you are very old or very frail. Anyone who tells you otherwise is not telling you the whole truth. 6, the medical profession is supposed to make you healthier and teach you how to make yourself healthier. Our goal is not to scare you or sanction behaviors that make you less healthy, like staying indoors, not getting adequate amounts of fresh air and sunshine, not allowing you to exercise, not allowing you to socialize. When you do all of these things, you look like garbage and you feel like garbage. Humans are the most social creatures on the planet, and medical studies clearly show that we are healthier when we have a social network and when we have human touch on a regular basis. 7, the medical profession should not be making promises it cannot deliver. We've been trying to develop vaccines against hepatitis C, AIDS, herpes, SARS, and MERS for decades, and we have failed. In fact, we have never been successful making a vaccine against any coronavirus, partly because RNA-based viruses like COVID mutate a lot. So at the start of the pandemic, it made no sense to promise that we could develop a vaccine at all, let alone develop one safely and quickly. It is now clear that the inoculations that have been developed neither prevent disease nor prevent transmission, and given our decades of failure, we should have known that and been honest with it up front. 8, normally we isolate those who are sick or high risk, not the healthy or low risk. It makes sense if you are actively sick and contagious to avoid others because you pose a risk to them. But being well and unvaccinated poses an infinitesimally small risk. Equally, when we develop a treatment or prevention, we give it to those who will benefit the most, the sick and the high risk. We don't automatically give it to everyone, especially not to people who we know are well or low risk. 9, doctors are supposed to believe in the sanctity of every human life and therefore treat people like individuals. The mandate of the profession is not to sacrifice individuals without their consent for the benefit of the rest of us. That's what the Nuremberg Code is all about. 10, all interventions in medicine always produce some harm to someone. So anyone who tells you that their intervention is no risk or produces no harm is not being completely honest with you. 11, ultimately, the job of doctors is to predict the future, and predicting the future is fraught with difficulty. Our job is to predict the future benefits and future harms of our interventions, and we're supposed to carefully weigh the potential harms and benefits in order to decide what to do. We do not force a treatment on someone who is more likely to suffer a side effect from an intervention than they can be helped by that intervention or help other people. 12. During this pandemic, the authorities have not been willing to admit that their measures like lockdowns, mask wearing, social isolation, vaccinations, etc. can produce harm. Telling children that if they are not careful enough, they will die, or they will be responsible for if their grandparents die, can be harmful. So is not allowing them to socialize, go to school, or exercise. We have been voluntold to participate in the biggest medical and social experience in the history of humanity, and no one knows how this is going to turn out, but it won't all be good, and it won't all be reversible. 13, transparency and truth-telling are crucial ethical principles. When they are missing, we wonder what is being hidden and why. More importantly, we are supposed to treat one another like equal human beings, and lack of transparency and truth-telling are disrespectful, because we are treated as though we are too stupid to understand, or that we don't deserve to know the truth, or we are too dangerous to know the truth. Doctors are not supposed to behave that way. You have the right to know about things that will both help you and harm you. It's called disclosure, and it is what makes consent informed. 14. There was no vaccine for the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic, yet when tested in 2015, very elderly people who had survived that flu through natural immunity still had antibodies. Early in the COVID pandemic, no one could possibly have known that naturally acquired immunity is not as good as vaccine-based immunity for COVID, because that is seldom true in medicine. Natural immunity involves not just to develop antibodies like vaccines produce, it also involves innate and also cell-based immunity, and therefore is often superior. In medical practice, I did immunity testing all the time on patients, and if the tests say that you are immune, then you are immune and safe. And whether that was acquired naturally or by vaccination. And if you have proven immunity, we never give you a vaccine. And we have always relied on herd immunity for those not vaccinated. 15, beware of experts. Sometimes they cannot see past their own area of expertise. They can see one tree, but they cannot see the forest, the big picture. So listen to them, but stop worshiping them. Sorry. They are not God. They have clearly proven that they do not have all of the answers. 16, medical science advances by asking questions, criticizing present theories, thinking outside the box. The famous Nobel Prize-winning physicist Niels Bohr said, "We all agree that your theory is crazy. The question that divides us is whether it's crazy enough." If there was one thing we must all learn from this pandemic, it is this, and do not forget this. Always question experts. Always question all politicians. Always question all doctors. It's not just your right to question them, it's your duty. We all owe that to our children and our grandchildren. 17, we don't have vaccines against most infectious diseases, even viral ones, but we can treat many of them. So why did we not look more actively into treatment for COVID at the start of the pandemic? And why, when respected scientists found treatments that seemed to work, were they ridiculed and canceled? That's not following the science, folks. 18, our traditional vaccines are studied intensely for a long time and actively, not just passively, monitored for side effects before being released to the public. None of this is occurring with the present inoculations. We have never been bribed, shamed, threatened, or coerced people into taking a treatment of any kind, no matter how effective, because it is considered unethical to do so. We have never used pregnant women and their unborn children as guinea pigs on which to test radically new gene-based therapy because it is unethical to do so. 19, pharmaceutical companies have always been held accountable for their products, not the government. The present monitoring of side effects is done by the same government that will now have to pay compensation for injury, a clear conflict of interest that has never occurred before. And finally, 20, in medicine we know that children are not little adults and they should not be treated as little adults. They are in a crucial developmental phase of their lives. Children rarely get sick from COVID, yet we have made them engage in self-harming behaviors like social isolation, mask wearing, and even vaccinations for our benefit, not theirs. We have never before in the history of medicine used children as human shields to protect adults. It is morally unconscionable and it must stop. I have no doubt that there are children who are not immune to COVID and because of comorbidities are sufficiently at risk from COVID that their parents, in consultation with their child's doctor, may choose to vaccinate their child purely for that child's benefit, despite the experimental nature of the inoculation. Parents, with rare exceptions, should always have the ultimate right to decide what is best for their children, not the politicians and not the experts, and protecting the elderly should not enter into the equation for the child. I implore all parents to do your own research and do not allow yourself to be coerced by the authorities. I am here today as a doctor with a degree in medical ethics, but more importantly, I stand before you today as a grandfather. I do not, as a grandfather, want my grandchildren to take any risks or suffer any harm whatsoever for my benefit. In closing, I have two favors to ask all of you. The first is that Paula Tucci and Stephen Potter of Stand Up Canada and I have been working on 18 videos, about 10 minutes long each, that are educational and I think can appeal to any reasonable Canadian, and tell them about stuff like this. And if you want to check them out, please do so. They're on the website standupcanada.solutions or on YouTube standupcanada.solutions. Check them out. Tell all your friends. They're quite good. And I thank Paul and Steve for allowing me to help with them in doing so. And the second favor is that there's a lot of division in our country right now. Please have compassion for every Canadian, because every regular Canadian is scared. We're either scared of the virus or scared of the measures they've instituted to fight the virus. We can continue to be the best country in the world only if we stay united in our love and respect for one another. Thank you for being here today, and remember that united we are strong.